For 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for holding this hearing on the so-called American Rescue Plan, something we've been asking to do for quite a while. The hearing has provided us with the opportunity to highlight some of the most disastrous impacts of the plan on the American economy and on American families, as well as the devastating inflation that's resulted. In fact, over the last 15 months, the economic outlook has also deteriorated in many aspects of society. The federal deficit in 2021 was $2.78 trillion, the second highest deficit in American history, and $517 billion more than CBO projected. So far this year, the Federal Reserve has already increased interest rates twice, by a quarter of a point in March and half a point in May, and expected to increase rates again later this week. Prior to ARPA, CBO projected no rate increases until 2024. The S&P 500 is down 16% from its peak. Productivity fell at a 7.3% annual pace last quarter, the largest decrease in 75 years. The labor force participation remains below what it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Gas prices are above $5 a gallon, up 109% since Biden became president. Real wages have declined by 4.2% since Biden became president. And the federal debt has increased by almost $3 trillion and is on track to increase by another $16 trillion under the president's budget proposal, reaching the highest level in American history as a percentage of the economy. And what's even more egregious is much of the funding from this American Rescue Plan was lost due to fraud, unemployment insurance fraud. The government has confirmed at least $163 billion, which with third-party estimates as high as $400 billion. All of this because architects of the American Rescue Plan, congressional Democrats and the administration, refused to include guardrails such as identity verification, which would protect the funding. It's clear that much of the taxpayer-funded spending from the rescue plan was spent on policies that actually reduced labor force participation and spent on things completely unrelated to combating COVID-19. I want to ask Mr. Moore, as I said, interest rates are rising. You cite GDP will grow at less than a point in the second quarter. In your opinion, what does the next 6 months look like for the American consumer?
Look, I think this is a really dangerous time for the U.S. economy. We're at a, I'm kind of in agreement with one of the Jamie Dimon, who said last week that it just feels like we're on the beach and a tsunami is coming. And I hope I'm wrong. The last thing, I've lived through 6 recessions during my lifetime, deep recessions, and they're extraordinarily painful and they cause incredible pain and suffering. So I pray that we can skate around this. But Mr. Cline, what's bothered me, frankly, about this hearing is the quote, "It's not our fault," is not an economic strategy, right? To just say it's not our fault. I've been in economics for 35 years. I never even heard the term supply chain problems until Joe Biden came into office. Where did this idea of supply chain problems come? We had under Reagan, when we had the massive recovery, we had an 18-month period where the economy grew by 12%. There were no supply chain problems. The inflation rate fell. It didn't grow. Economic growth is associated with lower inflation. When you produce more goods and services, the inflation rate goes down. It doesn't go up. If the economy produces more apples, what happens to the price of apples? So I think what worries me right now, sir, is what's the solution? When Joe Biden says we should pass the Build Back Better bill and add another $2 or $3 trillion to the debt, it scares the hell out of me. That's the solution, more and more spending, more price controls. We had price controls in the 1970s, Mr. Cline, and it was a disaster. That's what led to gas lines and the collapse of the economy. So very worried about things. I think what we ought to do is call for an immediate 10 or 15% across the board cut in every government program. They've had 30% increases. Let's get government spending down quickly to help solve this inflation problem, make the tax cuts permanent, and let's suspend all this, green energy stuff for a while and produce what produces 70% of our energy, which is oil, gas, coal, nuclear power.
Thank you. I want to note that our colleague, Ms. Jayapal, who's not on right now, was talking about the pre-pandemic economy and how it was going, and it was going quite well due to the tax cuts that were passed by the Trump administration, by the Republican Congress prior to the pandemic. So I would hope that we would adopt some of the policies that you're recommending, and we can save this economy from sliding into a recession. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now